Good morning, everybody, and welcome to King Arthur and Lady of the Lake today. I think today is going to be quite robust, to say the very least, and I think we may well need to bring out the talking stick, Michael, where we're going to have to actually agree to not interrupt each other in the middle of our feistiness and our love for each other.
I'll tell you
So,
what, this is going to be a difficult one.
so what is all of this about? I hear you say we're talking about equality today, and we're going to do it as the mature masculine and the mature feminine within us, and also as a mature man and a mature woman. So we're going to try and keep it nice as much as
Yep.
we can do about something we both feel really passionate about.
Mm.
So, so kind of employing the talking stick, I'm going to give it to you, Michael, to start off.
Really? Okay. So you're going to get me to start this one. Okay, cool. All
I
right.
just
This is
want
your
something to
idea,
agree
Helen,
with.
but that's okay. Okay, so let's be really specific about this, right? We're talking about gender equality today. And I'm going to go really broad to start with, and then I think we can probably narrow this down and be a lot more focused as the conversation evolves.
Yeah.
So I am of the belief, based on what I observe in society and in my life, that there's no such thing as gender inequality, right? That's based on my experience, and I will round out that assertion by saying that in our society, I observe that men and women have the same opportunities, and they have the same abilities to be able to achieve the same things if they choose to. And aside from the odd thing that we might see in the workplace every now and then, which affects both, and let's be more focused about what we mean by gender. We're talking about male and female, because I did a podcast, and I'm not going off track. I just want to put a container around this discussion for people. So whilst we respect there are lots of people out there who identify as other than male or female, I think for the purpose of our discussion, Helen, would you agree that we'll just stick with men and women, male and female? Is that cool?
And how people identify themselves as. So if somebody identifies as a female, then to own that space, and if they identify as a male, to own that space. So yeah, we're
Yep.
talking about the male, female,
Yeah,
and
cool.
whoever decides to be put into that basket.
Yeah, let's do that, because I did some research for one of my podcast episodes last week, and discovered that worldwide there are 64 different genders that people could choose to identify as around the world, and so that can be a very broad discussion. But so if we're just focusing on that, I think even in the workplace we find that there's equality in the context of there's discrimination against men and women in the workforce. And so I think we can explore that a little bit as well. But my assertion is that that equality exists between the two genders, male and female. Over to you.
Picking up the stick.
Over to you, Helen.
Okay, so I'm actually quite nervous about this topic, and I've been aware that I was going to talk about this today, and I had a fear underneath it, because I know that no matter what we say here, people have strong views on it. And so depending on what your view is, to whether they revere what you say or whether they hate what you're saying. And so I just want to prefix the fact that this is my opinion and I'm allowed to have it, and this is my experience. And I'm also trying to look at it from a broad perspective as well. But I also know that my experience is limited. So I'm just speaking from that space. I don't agree that there is equality, and I probably don't agree with that in a very strong way. And why that is that I totally agree with your point that there is the ability for everybody to do everything if they want. We have the equal rights to do the things that we want to do. We have the ability to be able to go into whatever we want to do, and there's all of that. However, what my thought is that we're coming from as we spoke about that beautiful discussion last week that actually brought us to this point is the ancestry that we're
Hmm.
dragging into the present. And so, just when I was growing up, men were pussies if they had emotions or they wanted to do things that were girl things. And equally, girls were tomboys if they wanted to do boy things. And, this is 30 years ago. It's not long ago. We're talking only 100 years ago that women were seen as having value through the war and getting the vote and everything. And we discussed that also was the case for working men as well. So there's discrimination on both sides, sure, but we are bringing forward the mental inequality. And that's what is affecting our environment today. It's not the actual rules, it's the way people behave towards each other in these environments. So, for example, if I want to be seen as equal in doing something, it comes with a connotation of whatever somebody's psyche is around that. So that's where the inequality is. It's in the perception of the environment that we're actually trying to be equal within. So, in the workforce, there is very strong ideas about a woman's place. And there's a big kind of like, that boy psychology that is carried into the workplace where I've spoke to many men that both personally at barbecues and our work environments, they say, I feel so embarrassed to be a man sometimes. I don't want to even join in all of that crap, but I feel like I'm not allowed not to.
Yep.
And equally, women are coming from this place of like, I feel like I have to behave like a man to do what I need to do because that's what. So there's this narrative. So I get that we are allowed to do everything, but it's actually, we're fighting the shadow of our ancestry as to where gender has been and the wounds that now shows up for us.
Mm. Interesting perspective. And I'd like to pull parts of that apart a little bit
Yeah.
and speak into, so what we're talking about here is equality, and you use the word discrimination. And so I think they're two different things. I think that if we can agree, which I think you have agreed with me, that we have equal opportunities, whether we're men or women, we have equal opportunities and we have the equal ability to be able to do and be whatever we want and whoever we want in 2020. Where I think the disconnect here is, what it feels like for me, is that we're talking about discrimination as opposed to equality. So if there's equality, if there wasn't equality, that would mean that men and women don't have the same opportunity to live the life that they want to, and that there is some kind of restriction on one or both genders to be able to do that and achieve what they want in life. So I think first I'd like to focus in on that, like really get laser focused in on that. And if we agree that men and women have the same opportunity to be and do whatever they want in life, then isn't that equality? And the other thing that we're talking about is discrimination against people for whatever it is in that particular environment or situation.
Mm.
Is that it? Do you think we could concede that together or not?
No.
No? Okay. So what's the difference for you?
I think
I'm curious as to what the difference is for you, because if we, yep, yep.
yeah. So I hear what you're saying, and and I don't mind disagreeing about it. It's totally fine. The fact that everybody can,
Mm.
everybody has the ability, is um, is not up for debate. We all have the ability,
But
but do
doesn't that
we
make us equal?
but don't we don't always get given then the opportunity. So we often aren't able to realize our strong fullest potential because of the expectation that's placed on us for both genders. So what that looks like to me is that I know you have this beautiful stance on doing housework, that all men can do housework and all men should do housework. And that is absolutely true. Everybody has the equal ability to do
Mm.
housework.
Mm.
But what's the overall expectation of our society? And we're talking about people who, from our grandfathers that we are still around, and my children's grandparents, and my kind of experience of being a wife coming through in my 20s and 30s,
Mm,
that certainly wasn't the case. The expectation was that, oh well, you chose to go to work, so that's your bag, kind of thing. That there's no sharing of other things. It's kind of like you choose to do all of it, or you choose to be at home with the child. And then equally, I've noticed men who've stepped into that role of being at home with their children and being amazing, incredible men, which, we're almost trying to get our society to aspire to
mm,
have that kind of side to them available. And I've seen them ridiculed because it's not normal for men to be
mm.
at home. So this is not just me saying it's not equal for women. I feel that the roles that are so ingrained in our society actually prevent us societally, like as a society, we get prevented from being in our best self, even though we have the abilities.
Mm,
And it's constantly revered that, like, oh wow, it's the first woman to do this, or the first woman to do that, or God, did you see that guy who did that? Like, it's unusual if they're doing something outside of the gender norm.
mm,
And so I think that's the issue. So yeah, the fact that we all have the ability is absolutely right, but whether then we get trusted with the opportunity, and that's where discrimination comes in.
yep.
That's where the discussion is. And I know for sure that there is differences in pay. I know for sure that there's differences in kind of the succession rate and all that kind of thing. That's a completely different conversation because it it's a different energy in the workplace. But across the board, I think there's still very much an energy
Mm,
around what the expectation is for the man and for the woman. And I know women who are like, he needs to go to work and support us. Like, it's his role to bring the family money.
mm.
And I'm like, well, isn't that the same as somebody turning around in a pub and saying it's her job to wash the dishes and change the baby's nappy? I'm just as annoyed about that as I am about anything else. It's about putting people in a box due to their genitals. And that's not appropriate.
So I would agree with that. And I would also put forward that maybe we could talk into that even more deeply and speak into choice, the choice that each individual has to take on certain roles in life, in relationships as well, and also the boundaries that we choose to set as individuals within a relationship. And it's like, then we've got to talk about, are we still talking about equality, or are we talking about the choices that we make, the boundaries that we don't set, and then how we feel discriminated against because of that? And I'm going to tell you a very quick story around that.
Mhm.
So, a friend of the family's is a primary school teacher, and he's a man, and he faces the most horrible amount of discrimination. And some people might call it sexism, whatever they want to call it. It doesn't matter. It's just a label. But the fact is, he's judged quite harshly for being a primary school teacher. And it's even been said, why would a man want to spend his time around little boys and girls? Right. But you put a woman in that role and nobody questions it. It's just taken as a natural thing, right? But that doesn't stop the fact that there's equal opportunity for men and women to be primary school teachers.
Mhm.
Where we fall into categories of discrimination, sexism, um, what's and roles that are apparently appropriate or inappropriate for men and or women to do, is where we step into something outside. This is just my opinion here. Step outside of equality, because equality, if things were unequal, then what that would mean is that women couldn't do these jobs, men couldn't do those jobs. It wouldn't be, men couldn't stay at home and look after kids, and women couldn't go out and be plumbers, right? And if that were the case, then yes, I'd agree that there's inequality in our society. um, and there are biological aspects to this as well. Men can't have kids. Men can't have babies, right? We can father children, but we can't carry the child, and we can't give birth, and we can't breastfeed, and we can't do all of these things that force women if they make the choice to have children, to take leave from work. And then it becomes a choice of how much leave do we take? And then, like, how long does that extend out for? And then we go, okay, well, let's just assume for a second that a woman takes, and I know we're going into so many different rabbit holes here. That's our conversations, isn't it? But a woman takes a year off work, chooses to do that, not because she's told to, not because she's a woman, not because she's any less capable or competent as a man, right? But she chooses to, because I want to have this experience of being a mother. I want to be home with my baby. I want to do all this stuff. And there's a choice. And so then we fast forward 12 months. During that 12-month period, business has changed, colleagues have moved on, people get promoted, and then this person then goes back into that company or that workforce, and things have changed and moved and progressed and evolved. And you can't expect to then occupy the same chair, the same role when things have changed and moved. I did this experiment with two people, a man and a woman, who graduated medical school at the same age. They got pretty much the same marks. This case study is actually out there in the context of gender equality and equal pay and all that sort of stuff. And so up until, and I'll cut it really short because there's a whole story here. But essentially what happened, pretty much the same age, within a month of each other, they went to medical school, they graduated. They went to law school. I'm sorry, not medical school, law school. They graduated at the same time with the same marks. And then they were both employed by the same company. This was a case study in inequality, gender equality, workplace economy, equality, I should say, equality of opportunity, equality of outcome, all this sort of stuff, right? So it was an actual
You
experiment.
froze
3 years
for a
later.
moment then.
Oh, did I?
Mm.
What did we get up to?
So that you were just saying about what the results were.
Okay. So they graduated university at the same time. They were employed by the same company. They followed the same path. They were given all the same opportunities. They both got married at around about the same time as well. That wasn't essentially designed. I think that's just what happened. So they got married about the same time. And then within 18 months of getting married, both of those people had children with their respective partners. And in the case of the woman, she chose to take 2 years off work. And while she took that 2 years off work, her male companion, who she'd gone on this journey with from a professional perspective, kept on working and supporting his family, right? Um, and whether it was male or female, it doesn't matter. We've got to remember at this point, there's a choice that's been made. And he took paternity leave for 3 months as well. So he stayed at home with his wife and his child for 3 months, went back into the workforce, and his female companion continued to take another, what's that, 21 months off work. By the time she went back, her male companion had been given a promotion, right? As a result of continuity, as a result of the fact that, there was still growth, there was evolution, there was further education, there was all this stuff that he chose to do that she didn't. And so he was given a pay rise and she came in, and of course her position was held for her. And so she, sat back in her chair. And then we have this argument about, well, these people have got the same experience, the same this, the same that, the same whatever. Why should she be penalized for having a child? And this is where the pay gap argument comes in. It's like, well, they're the same age. The only difference is she stayed home, but there was a choice. And and I think there's so many rabbit holes in this discussion. We have to take into account so many things. We've also got to take into account industry, right? And the women that choose to go into trades, for instance, electrician, plumber, bricklayer, all that sort of stuff. Like, do girls actually choose to go into those industries? Do men choose to go into education as much as women do? Do men choose to go into nursing as much as women do? There's such a choice, and we find in the Scandinavian countries, they have created this egalitarian kind of society where everyone's given equal opportunity to do everything, right? And everyone said, okay, there's going to be no sexism, there's going to be no gender inequality, whatever. everyone, and we're going to see what people choose to do. We're going to see what men choose to do and what women choose to do when there are no barriers to anything. And what they found in Scandinavia is that equality exists, but men and women make different choices about what professions to step into. And so, and we find that men step into um, medical science technology fields more than women do, and it just so happens that those fields are paid more than other fields
Yeah.
that women step into, right? So there's all this stuff, Helen, like we can just unpack this, and I'd love to talk about this for ages. There's so many different angles to this argument. It's not like we can't just make these blanket statements and go, well, yes, there's inequality, and yes, there's equality of opportunity, right? But there's still a pay gap problem. And it's like,
Yeah. I
there's
mean,
so many angles.
yeah, that is a huge angle that you've just mentioned. I'm trying to extrapolate that out a little bit. Um, and I think what really you're saying as well is that just by that, then there isn't equality. So, by saying that, yes, there is equality, but then, looking at that and saying, so there's not equality. Because
I'm
what I
saying there is
what
a,
I'm
I'm saying
talking
there is a,
about.
I'm saying there is equality, but we've got to extrapolate this out and go, well, yes, there's equality, and this is my opinion. There's equality, but people have the opportunity to make choices,
Hmm.
and people make choices which can sometimes sabotage their career prospects,
Yeah,
right?
but that's not got much to do with the fact that there's a real battle going on out there for what people do want to do, for the choices that they do want to make. And that's the thing, really, is it's the narrative underneath everything about how hard somebody has to fight to go against what is the norm.
Mm,
And because we're all allowed to be completely individual,
yep.
and we can have incredibly amazing feminine women who want to be builders, but they will not be treated the same as a man builder. A male builder will be treated completely differently. For a while there, I used to work
But
as
is
an
it, but isn't that
account manager.
discrimination? Sorry.
I used to work as an account manager,
Yep.
and I used to work in blue collar hire. So I would manage the relationships between the blue collar worker
Mm,
and the company that they were put into. And I mean big contracts. So, like, large kind of labor hire staff of, like, between 10 and 100 people,
yep.
and national contracts. So, and then I dealt with the managers of those sites, and then dealt with what they needed from there into then what our kind of company could provide for them.
Okay.
And I cannot tell you just how I was treated purely for the fact that I was a woman. As soon as I walked in there as a woman,
Mm,
hey, all of that crap,
yeah, that's
you
not
know.
cool, is it? Yep. Yep.
And that's what I'm talking about on the ground, like intellectually. Completely get what you're coming from, but I'm
Mm,
talking about day to day on the ground, the kind of behaviors that women have to put up with just for being a woman, and then equally the behaviors that men have to put up with for being a man. So a man who walks in the schoolyard, who is then kind of ostracized and bullied by other men because he's had a conversation with the other stay-at-home moms because he's a stay-at-home dad.
mm,
You put that scenario of a woman having lunch because she's a builder with a bunch of other builders, and the connotation that rises. So,
oh,
and
of
not
course.
it's not necessarily that then there's discrimination, because they're so closely linked. Like, it's about behaving with an equal balance of behaviors towards that person, that then when there's say there's a woman working on a building site and there's a position for a leading hand, or team leader or whatever, there is no way in a million years that there will not be pushback from the men if that woman was to move up into that position and look after men.
See, I
I mean,
would.
I just and, like, honestly, um that's just so it's just such a minefield. And equally, um I agree with your sentiment completely about male teachers. I find that appalling. We have never needed male teachers more. Like our whole schools should be filled with more male teachers than female teachers. We've never
Yep.
needed more male role models.
Yep.
And equally, he gets that discrimination against. And so it's not equal. It's not an equal rights thing because they're not employing men at the same rate because men don't feel safe enough to move into positions in caring environments, in education, in all of these roles,
Mm.
because it doesn't feel like there's an equal opportunity.
It's interesting. It's interesting. This is a very interesting discussion because you know also that I'm a strong advocate of Jordan Peterson and the stuff that he says and speaks and speak. He speaks into this quite proficiently and in a very articulate way. And I couldn't hope to match his level of articulation when it comes to this subject. But what I will say is that I totally agree what you're saying, in terms of what you said on the building site. How if the woman was given that supervisor role, there'd be pushback from men, absolutely, and men in traditionally held positions that I should say traditionally female held positions, like a primary school teacher, for instance, which is the accepted thing apparently out there. That's also not cool. I think we're getting stuck on words. I think we're getting stuck on words because when we start to define what does equality mean, it means that everyone has the equal opportunity to pursue whatever they want in life and they have the same ability to be able to do so. The other part of this is discrimination and maybe even sexism. So your experience of walking into that position where you were treated the way that you were, I would argue that that's sexist. I would argue that's sexism and sexual discrimination, as opposed to inequality, because what inequality says is you're not equal to a man and you can't do that job at the same not that you're not equal to a man, but you don't have the competence level to do that job and to perform those duties at the same level as a man. That's what inequality says. So nobody's actually saying, I don't think anyone out there would suggest that a woman doesn't have the same level of competence in a job as a man does. And I think if people said that,
Just on that though, there's equality, but what about equal opportunities? Because that's where the two of them really kind of comes together. So,
yep,
yep, equality, like you say, yep, we can do the equality thing across the board, but also I have to prefix that as well that we are talking about a Western society.
absolutely, yep, yep,
Because
yep,
this is
agreed.
certainly not the case in about 80% of the world. We're talking about just kind of our experience here in
Mm,
Australia and England, America, and and I don't know America. I'm not been in that situation, but we're talking about that equality stance. But what that leads to then, really, if we're having a discussion around it, it's about equal opportunity as part of being a gender.
but
It's
but do
gender
you know
equal opportunity.
that it's probably, I would say, a foregone conclusion. I would accept it as fact that we do have equal opportunity, because I don't think if a girl applied to trade school to be an apprentice bricklayer, for instance, that she would be denied. I don't think that if a boy applied to be a primary school teacher, he would be denied. And I'm only using those examples because they are predominantly, or historically, they've been roles that have been filled by the opposite gender over the years, right? Historically. So we and girls and boys are given the same opportunities at school to allow them to do the same things, to learn the same stuff. So, girls and boys are given the same opportunity to learn physics and chemistry and maths and English and all this stuff that they learn at school. And so, and in fact, on average, boys get lower marks in school than girls on average, and that's a fact. And so when we talk about equality of opportunity, everyone's given the same teacher, the same school, the same opportunity, and they're given access to the same subjects, and they're given access to the same support, these kids, right? Especially all across throughout all grades of school. And then when we then move on from school into the university, it's all dependent upon your level of competence as to which course you actually get into, and your competence is measured by your results in year 12. And so then, as long as you get the same results, this boy and this girl get the same results, they can both go to law school, they can both go learn how to be a doctor, they can both go and learn how to do whatever they want. And these other kids, all of them have the opportunity to then go to trade school if they want to, or be primary school teachers. So we talk about opportunity. Everyone's got the same opportunity, as far as I'm concerned, to do what they want. Where the disconnect happens is that, and again, this is just my opinion and in my estimation, where the disconnect happens is that people make choices. People make choices. And those choices then determine outcomes in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time. So here's the reality of a choice that people might make. So let's just say for a second that the which might speak into something called might speak into not inequality, but the choices that people make and how that turns out might speak into something that looks like inequality. So we got a boy and a girl graduate from school, they get the same marks in school. The boy goes off and decides to do something at university. The girl thinks, oh no, I want to have some time off and I want to go work at McDonald's or work in a Kmart or do whatever she wants to do for a period of time. And then and boys can do that too, of course, but I'm just using this as an example. They started off with the same opportunity, but they've made different choices in life. And so fast forward 5 years and the girl has chosen to stay in retail because it's easy. She can have a life, she can do what she wants to do and all the rest of it. And the boy's decided to pursue a career in whatever he's decided to pursue a career in. Let's just say that in 5 years' time, these two meet and they fall in love and they get married and they have kids. Logically speaking, they have to look after a family financially, right? So then the obvious decision is, well, who has the capacity right now to earn the greatest amount of money to support our family at the highest level? And of course, it's going to be the person who has pursued this career, this profession, who's going to earn a lot more money than what a retail assistant would. And so the logical choice is made that, well, he needs to go off and work full time and she will stay home and look after the kids and maybe work part time. And honestly, this is what happens statistically in over 75% of cases, that the opportunity has always been the same. But then when we make choices over time, where then we can almost sabotage ourselves in some aspects. Anyway.
I think we're talking about really different things, because I hear what you're saying about personal choices, and I'm not really talking about that. I don't see the inequality of personal choice, and I don't see the inequality in the decisions that people make as a couple, because they know who they are and where they are when they meet, and they know what the dynamic is, and that's for them to organize and to come up with. It's equally, the issue that, a woman is, a high-end surgeon, and her husband, she likes him because he works on the tools and he's handy,
Yep.
But a lot of the time, his mates at the tool shop would never cope with him staying at home to look after the baby.
But is that their problem? Is that
So,
their problem?
and that's what I'm saying, is that that's choice. So that's not really where I'm coming from today, I suppose. I think you can turn that any which way you want to support an argument. But I think where I'm coming from with it is, we're dealing with the psychology of the person who prevents us from moving. So yes, we've got the equality, but say if a man and a woman goes into an interview with a guy who's old school, who's part of the boys club, who is a misogynist, they're going to hire the guy and bring him into the fold.
And this same
And
guy these days in 2020 has gender quotas that he must meet as a regulation.
yeah, but
So
still, okay. So even in that, that means that if he has to hire the woman, she will never be treated with the same respect, equal respect, as the guy he would have hired had he not had them parameters around him.
yeah,
And that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the psychology that we battle with,
mm,
of the person who we are at the whim of in the positions that we choose.
yeah.
So it's not always our own choices or our own maturity or our own ability or our own availability for equality. And I mean, I'm happy to, I don't think this is all for women and all for men. I think it's just shitty all around,
I
really.
agree with that. I agree with
And
that.
I mean, I really admire Jordan Peterson and the stuff that he talks about. And I think he's an incredibly intelligent guy and he says some amazing things. I
Yep.
heard him do an interview with a woman on Channel 4, which was widespread because she literally attacked him on every
This was
point that he made.
Kathy Newman. Is it Kathy Newman?
I'm not sure of her name, but I was really disappointed and kind of, I just thought, you're doing nothing for us
Yep.
to attack him like that.
Yep.
Like as a mature woman, you're not helping by taking that stance to make you look like you're so defensive against males.
Yeah.
Like,
That really
you know, it
consolidated
was
his.
really, really, it was almost like proof in point,
That's right.
that
That's what
like
I was going to say. It really
men aren't going to
consolidated
be
his
listened
position.
to, men aren't, their voice isn't important. And that I work with men to ensure that their voices are heard,
Of course.
purely because I think men do need to be heard by women, but equally women need to be heard by men. So
Hmm?
it's and this is the equality thing, right? So I hear that and I see it and I just go, oh my God, it's playing into the hands of the message, right?
Mm.
But I equally have been in that position where I have had a male employee who was my boss walk into my bedroom when I was at a conference and get into bed with me.
What?
Right? Yeah, that's just, and I had to tell the bosses about that. And they said, he's really important to this firm, so we understand if you have to leave. Right? So
Oh my
that's
God.
my experience, right?
Yep.
Of
Yep.
equality in the workforce. And I was damn good at my job, very good at my job. So that's what's happening on the ground, right? And it
Would you say
comes,
that would you say that you were equal in competence to that guy?
oh, I wasn't in his position, but I was brilliant at my position
Yep.
in my role,
But
right?
you have the capability to do his role, didn't you?
Well, I wasn't. We were in different areas, but I could easily have done what he was doing for sure. It was
Okay.
in marketing and sales and all that kind of stuff, and I was well on my way to having that trajectory. But he brought a certain set of knowledge from his career that I didn't have. I brought a
Yep.
different set of knowledge, so I wasn't competing with him particularly. But at the same time, it was kind of like, yeah, put up with the behavior or leave. And
Or fight. Or
so,
fight. Stand up for yourself and
but the
exert some
thing is,
boundaries.
we're talking 20 years ago, and it would still have not really won. Like, women have only just started actually having this recognized, and Harry Weinstein and everything, that,
Yep.
I got that so heavily rested in my belly, that whole Me Too
Oh, I bet
movement.
you would have after that experience.
But
There's
that's
so much.
one, Michael. I've had about 25 of those. So I've been in a number of situations that I don't really care to talk about, but
Wow.
very much so.
Mm.
But at the same time, I'm mature enough to see that Terry Crews came on and said, well, actually, on the Me Too movement, I was abused
Yep.
by a woman.
Yep.
So what I'm saying is, it's in the maturity and the psychology of the person we're dealing with above us in
Mm.
whatever role we have.
Yep.
And they're the people who almost kind of, flail the sword as to whether we're going to get equal pay. It's a personality decision of each workplace we work in. Some places have incredible culture, and some women go,
Yep.
oh my God, there's a crash at my work. Um, and I had this beautiful conversation with a woman. Oh, it's a few years ago now, but she said, I feel like that real old school true woman. I feel this like need to nurture and love my child, but my circumstances, I need to work. And
Yep.
I said, there's nothing wrong with being what you think's a real woman. Like, there's nothing wrong with being in your softness, in your nurturing, in that ability and that beautiful connection with your child. But she was like, I'm so supported in my workplace. There's a creche at my work. I'm allowed to go down and breastfeed at lunchtime, and I'm still hitting all my targets because I can do my work after I put the baby to bed at night. And so I've been given this flexibility to still be brilliant at my job because I love it. And there's a perfect scenario.
So
Whereas
she was
I know
given. So
about
she was given the opportunity to be able to do that.
That's right. And that's equal opportunity because it meant she could still be at the level of her colleagues who didn't have a baby
Yep.
through choice, but she was able to do both. And
Mm.
that's equal opportunity. I can have a baby and still be amazing at my job. And that's
Yep.
important to me. But then I've equally spoke to women who've said, like, I have to run into the toilets at break and try and breast pump. And then I got a warning from my boss saying that he heard that I'm using a breast pump in the toilets and it's inappropriate. And I got a written warning about something completely unrelated. And I'm like, yeah, so this is kind of what we're talking about. Like, your workplace and your own personal experiences and the competence or adequacy of the man above or woman above, because
Mm.
women sometimes treat men terribly in workplaces because they're that typical kind of like, white men have caused all the problems in the world, which is bullshit as well. So
Yeah,
it,
the old white privilege thing.
yeah, but it's across the board, right? There's this, but it needs to be acknowledged that um that it really is a personal journey, and we can't kind of say, oh well, that's bullshit because there's this. We really do have a very, very long way to go to create equal opportunity due to the psychology of the people that we share the world with. And it's our responsibility through conversations like this, where I know that you're bringing men through into your um, coaching and your journey to say, you step up into that mature masculine where you
Mm.
do all of these things and you do have this strength of character that you don't worry about what women are doing. They are equal, they can do this, and that's a really
Absolutely.
strong, important message. And I really feel the need to say that because I know that that's the man you are, and that's the kind of team you're building, is to live this. And and that is actually more to the point what we need to be teaching and educating the strength of character and the psychological ability
Mm.
to allow equal opportunity outside of our own ego and all of our ancestral history. And that goes for women who think everything that men do is terrible, and the whole kind of women rule the world, empower girls, blah, blah, blah. Because I can see there's a whole bunch. I have 2 girls and 2 boys.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I see my boys kind of feeling really unseen and inadequate because they're just boys. So they don't rule the world and they're not
Mm.
empowered, not
Mm.
empowerable.
Mm.
So, I'm not by any means gender bias either. I think we just need to drop the whole thing. We just need to stop fighting for our corner
Yep.
all the time, and just really love and view the human being. What's their capabilities? What do they bring? Who are they? What do they deserve? What have they earned? And and then personally, we need to then, as you have talked about the choices, we need to sit in the choices that we make
Mm.
and
Mm.
not then feel that we have a particular privilege to be where somebody else is
Yep.
when we've made a choice. So yeah, it's a deep well, Michael.
It really is, and I respect everything that you said. I really do, and I know you. I know you respect men too. Like you can see some of the difficulties that men go through in different stages of life, and you're really there to help and guide too. And you're this powerful, strong, feminine energy as well that can step out and have these really good quality opinions and viewpoints and deliver them in a respectful way too, which is amazing. Um, I think I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I think that what we need to do is probably create some good definitions around equality, sexism, and discrimination,
Mm,
because I still maintain, as much as I respect your point of view, I still maintain that we do have equality of opportunity because anyone can do whatever they want in our society. What the problem, in my opinion, is that yes, anyone can do what they want, but when a man steps into a primary school teacher role, for instance, and or a woman steps into being a bricklayer or whatever it is,
yeah.
then there's a much higher potential for that person to be discriminated against and be a victim of sexism. So I really think that because the topic of today is gender equality, right? And I truly believe that we do have that. I believe we have gender equality because nobody's stopping you from doing this. and nobody's stopping me from doing this. And in fact, people celebrate the fact that somebody like you and somebody like me of the opposite gender can come together and have a really good quality discussion. So that makes us equal. And we both respect each other's points of view. That makes us equal. And both of us have had the opportunity to do this. And
Yes.
any man and any woman out there can do the same thing. And so, in my estimation, that means we have equality of opportunity. Equality of outcome is a very different thing. Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot. Once we start to go for equality of outcome, that's when problems start to happen. That's when we start to see people being discriminated against, and we see gender quotas in workplaces having to be adhered to, and all of a sudden competence goes out the window, and it's about ratios. You know, we've got to have 50% women, 50% men. And then all of a sudden you've got two people in an interview, male and female, and there's a mismatch in quotas, and they have to employ the female because otherwise, or they have to employ the male because otherwise they're not meeting their quotas. But the person that they employ has a lower level of competence for that particular position. And
Mm,
so then the outcome is skewed
mm,
as a result of. So I think there's so many different aspects, but I agree with you in the fact that people are discriminated against in different roles, and men are discriminated against if they choose to stay at home and look after kids and then do all the stuff associated with that. And women are discriminated against as well if they choose to have children and then go straight back to work. Right? Women are also discriminated against with that. It's like, how can you just leave your baby? I've heard these discussions. You just had a baby and a month later you're back at work and your baby's in childcare. That opens up another discussion, I
mm,
think. But yeah, it's a big topic, Helen. And as usual, a good quality discussion.
mm,
And I think it's good that we've disagreed on certain aspects of this
mm.
because it gives a real balanced view for the people that are watching.
I think, on something like this, there's so many anomalies. It's very, very difficult to, because there's no right or wrong answer in this, right? It is
Mm,
literally a life experience. It is a viewpoint. It's
yep.
a matter of, I think, really, for me, what I love is the
Mm,
constant contemplation that we can have from these discussions as to, okay, what does that look like?
yep.
and and I hear, what you're saying about the quarters and everything, and I think, I don't want to feel like I've got a job because, I've made up numbers.
Yeah, imagine that.
But at the same time as well, it is against that kind of the bias of the psyche that, oh, it's a man's job anyway, so it's almost that has had to be put in to give women equal opportunity, right? So why have these things been put in place if it was equal to begin with? And it's so funny that the amount of population of females in the workforce is extraordinary. We have an enormous um, female workforce, and so and and what women bring is they bring a completely different kind of energy to the
Mm,
workplace.
mm,
And and i and i feel sad about that as well, because a lot of women who end up very, very strong career women, they almost then have to say, oh, I don't care about babies, I don't want to have a baby. And that might be something that they truly kind of hold as like, I don't have the need. I'm fine. I'm just really happy at my work. But
yep.
then they're discriminated against, and there's this kind of like, oh well, they're ball breakers, or they're this, or they're that, and so they hold this energy of kind of trying to compete in a male environment, because that's who they have to become to get that role. They have to almost become part of the boys' club. And what the sadness in that for me is that we're actually losing the edge that women can bring, that's part of the female psyche. And so there's a massive conversation just in that,
Mm,
how do we come into the workplace? What part of ourselves do we come in the feminine? Do we come in the masculine? What part of the feminine masculine split does a guy have in the workforce? What kind of masculine feminine split does a woman bring to the workforce? Where's the kind of equality in that? Where's the balance? Because it all really does come back to balance. And that's the contemplation I would
mm,
like for people to think about, is what part am I playing in the kind of equal opportunity space? As a man in the workforce, do I really value women as equally as the guy who I admire here? Do I admire this woman the same? What qualities do I admire in this woman? What qualities do I admire in this man? And for women, what do you feel about this guy? What do you feel about this woman? Who do you think? What do you think they bring? What do you think their value is? And to really just have this contemplation about what equality means to you, and not to just get pissed off about it and start, saying, oh, this, but what are we doing about it? As in compassionately,
Mm.
in a way to heal it as part of our current environment. What part can we play um, in making sure that everybody's seen and heard equally?
Yeah. And that's a good thing. That's a really good thing to leave people with, from your perspective. And I'd love to just give my perspective and leave people with something as well, if that's okay. And
Yeah,
so, what I'd like to leave with everyone is this is a big discussion: equality, discrimination, sexism. They all intertwine in some way, and you can't have a discussion about equality or inequality without bringing in discrimination, sexism, because it's all part of the same discussion. And so, what I would encourage people to do is, as you said, Helen, is contemplate. But I would love to suggest that you contemplate on additional things as well as what Helen has suggested. And they are things like the choices that you make create the outcome that you get in life. So the things that we choose to do and the path that we choose to take have consequences. And having a think about the life that you're living now, is it really somebody else's fault, or are choices that you've made to get yourself to where you are now, which may look like inequality, which may look like um, inequality of outcome, or inequality of opportunity. Is it really that, or is it the fact that you've made choices? And this is for men and women. you know 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, sometimes, I know that the choices that I made, I'm 46, and the choices that I made 25 years ago, I still see the ripple effect of that now at 46, right? And so we fool ourselves into thinking that we can just go off and make all these choices, and we should still have the opportunities and the abilities and the skills and the attributes and all the stuff that everybody else has, or another person has, that have made different choices years ago. So I'd really encourage people to take a lot more personal responsibility around the choices that they make, because that creates an outcome that you're experiencing in life now.
yeah. And I have to add something to that, because yeah, I
I love
and
this.
what it is that, yeah, it's a self responsibility, and so within that, recognize the choices you've made based on what the expectation of your gender is that you carry. So, because I know for me, I've made choices that I felt I have to make because of my gender. Um,
Do you
and
think you could have
and
made different choices if you?
yeah, it's almost like to be kind of, almost indoctrinated into female. And so often as a young woman, you don't realize that, um, actually, no, and I'm okay with being kind of, um, spoken about, because I didn't do that as a woman.
Mm, mm,
And I'm
mm.
sure that that's the very same for men. That, you know, um, I mean, that famous film, Billy Elliot, how he was bullied because he wanted to be a
Yep,
ballet dancer, right? So,
yep, yep.
I think, women, especially with children, we make decisions that are very difficult for us. As in, it makes our life more difficult, but we feel that we have to take it on because we're women.
And men are
And
the same, as you've correctly stated. So men feel this need, pressure from society, and also they put on themselves to go out there and work long hours and provide for their family and all this stuff. And so they miss out on
that's right.
stuff that they would rather be part of, which is their children growing up,
Mm,
essentially.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So it's a big discussion, multifaceted, and so many different rabbit holes and angles that we could possibly go down. But what this has done is it brings awareness to the fact that you and I think this has been beautiful, Helen, because you and I have been able to have this really good quality discussion. Neither of us has gotten frustrated or angry or been on the defensive. We've actually opened and just listened to each other's points of view, put forward our own, and what we've also done is we've opened all of these other opportunities for more discussion around things that we've touched on today as well, which we'll probably watch this back and actually make a list of other things that we could talk about on other episodes.
Mm,
So it's
mm,
been good, and I really respect you, and I respect the fact that we can have these discussions. And I think it would be awesome for more people to be able to have discussions of this quality out there in the big wide world, instead of feeling like they've got to defend a position. They feel like they've got to attack someone to defend their own position.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And you only get places with discussion. And I mean,
Yep.
I'm so grateful for the people who've protested for me in the past. I'm not that woman, but I am this woman, right? I'll
Mm,
have the
mm,
conversation on the ground, but I'm so grateful that people have protested against all kinds of things that have given me the life that I have now. But now I'd love to just have that gentleness of healing,
mm-hmm.
the ancestry to this, and to
Yep.
the narrative, and to respect and grow from each other's points of view, and really embody the fact that that's their experience and respect it, because we're really ultimately only responsible for how we behave.
Yep.
So constantly then adjusting our own behavior to encourage change, but fighting about it's not going to do anything. It just reignites the defense position.
Yep.
So there's no point
Agreed.
in that.
Agreed. And I
Mm,
think one level deeper is if we can really detach from our ego, and you've touched on maybe three times in this discussion about ancestral patterns and ancestral psychology, and I think that's a really important part of this too, because we do have deeply ingrained beliefs about how things should be,
that's right.
um, based on what we have witnessed and maybe experienced historically too. And so I think that's a really important part of the discussion as well. Like, how much of that do we bring into our lives and our beliefs and our attitudes in all different aspects and roles that we play, in aspects of life and roles that we play as well.
Mm,
So I think I'm going to watch this back, Helen, and take some notes,
yeah.
and really like make a list of other topics that we can talk about, that we can extrapolate from this and just expand out on it.
Mm.
Really good quality discussion.
Mm. Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate your thoughts and ideas, and that's definitely something for me to contemplate too. So yeah, it was real food for thought today. It was really, really interesting and really beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Mm.
Thanks, Helen. And we
Thank-
hope you enjoyed this. And if you've got your perspectives and your opinions and your points of view, we'd love for you to share them in the comments, on this video.
Respectfully.
Respectfully, absolutely.
I'll see you next week,
See you
Michael.
next week.
Thanks.